Housing costs often rise during global conflicts because war and instability disrupt economies, supply chains, and population patterns. When conflicts break out, construction slows down due to shortages of materials, labor, and financing. At the same time, people are forced to move, increasing demand for housing in safer regions and overcrowding cities or neighboring countries. Inflation and uncertainty also push investors toward real estate as a safe asset, driving prices even higher. Together, reduced supply and increased demand cause housing costs to surge during global conflicts. Today we will talk about why housing costs rise during global conflicts. So before we start, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. 1. Introduction. The direct link between war and housing prices. Global conflicts have a deep and immediate impact on housing markets because they disrupt the fundamental balance between supply and demand. Housing is not just a commodity. It depends on stable economies, functioning labor markets, and uninterrupted supply chains. When war breaks out, whether regional or global, it creates uncertainty that affects construction, migration, investment, and government policy. Historically, major conflicts such as World War II, the Syrian Civil War, and the Russia-Ukraine War have all demonstrated sharp increases in housing costs in both affected regions and neighboring safe zones. The core reason is simple. Fewer homes are being built while more people are competing for them, pushing prices upward rapidly. 2. Supply chain disruptions and material shortages. One of the strongest drivers of rising housing costs during conflicts is the breakdown of global and regional supply chains. Modern construction depends on materials such as steel, cement, timber, glass, and fuel, all of which are often sourced internationally. During conflicts, trade routes become unstable or are directly blocked due to sanctions, naval restrictions, or damaged infrastructure. For example, energy price spikes during wartime can increase the cost of producing cement and steel by 20 to 60%, depending on the severity of the disruption. When these input costs rise, developers either slow construction or pass the costs onto buyers and renters. This reduces housing supply at the exact moment it is needed most. 3. Labor shortages and construction slowdowns. Conflicts also reduce the availability of skilled and unskilled labor needed for construction. Workers may be drafted into military service, displaced, or forced to migrate to safer areas. In many war-affected regions, construction labor shortages can reach 30 to 50%, significantly slowing down new housing projects. Even in neighboring countries, labor markets can become strained due to sudden population inflows. Additionally, safety risks discourage workers from operating in unstable zones. As construction timelines stretch and fewer housing units are completed, the existing housing stock becomes more competitive, driving prices upward. 4. Mass displacement and refugee housing pressure. War is one of the largest drivers of forced migration in the world. According to global humanitarian trends, conflicts can displace millions of people within months. When large populations move into safer cities or neighboring countries, housing demand spikes dramatically. For instance, the Russia-Ukraine conflict led to millions of refugees moving into parts of Europe, significantly increasing rental demand in countries like Poland and Germany. When demand rises suddenly while supply remains fixed, rents can increase by 10 to 30% or more in affected urban areas. Overcrowding also becomes common, pushing even lower quality housing prices higher. 5. Inflation, currency instability, and rising living costs. Global conflicts often trigger inflation due to higher energy prices, disrupted trade, and increased government spending on defense. Inflation reduces the purchasing power of households, but it also increases the nominal cost of housing construction and rent. Central banks may raise interest rates to control inflation, which further increases mortgage costs and reduces housing affordability. In unstable economies, local currencies may weaken, making imported construction materials even more expensive. This creates a feedback loop where both building costs and housing prices rise simultaneously, making housing less accessible for average families. 6. Investor behavior and safe haven real estate demand. During times of conflict, investors often move their capital away from risky financial markets and into real estate, which is seen as a more stable asset. This phenomenon increases demand for property, especially in politically stable countries. High net worth individuals and institutional investors may purchase residential properties not for living purposes, but as stores of value. This speculative demand can significantly inflate housing prices, particularly in major cities. In some markets, investor-driven purchases can account for 20 to 40% of total property transactions during crisis periods, further reducing availability for ordinary buyers. 7. Government policies, sanctions, and market restrictions. Governments often respond to conflicts with economic policies that indirectly affect housing markets. Sanctions can restrict trade in construction materials, while price controls or rent freezes may distort supply incentives. Additionally, governments may redirect resources toward defense spending, reducing public investment in housing projects and infrastructure development. Interest rate adjustments used to manage wartime inflation can also make mortgages more expensive, reducing homeownership accessibility. In some cases, emergency housing policies are introduced, but these are often insufficient to fully offset the rapid increase in demand caused by displacement and migration. 8. Long-term structural effects on housing markets. Even after conflicts end, housing costs often remain elevated due to long-term structural damage. Destroyed infrastructure, reduced housing stock, and slow reconstruction efforts keep supply tight for years. Rebuilding entire cities can take a decade or more, especially when funding and labor are limited. Additionally, migration patterns established during conflict often persist, meaning populations do not fully return to their original locations. This permanent shift in demographics keeps demand higher in safer regions. As a result, housing markets that experience conflict-related shocks often do not return to pre-war affordability levels quickly, creating lasting economic consequences. Conclusion. In conclusion, the rise in housing costs during global conflicts is the result of multiple interconnected economic and social forces acting at the same time. Wars and geopolitical instability disrupt the most basic foundations of housing supply by damaging infrastructure, breaking supply chains, and reducing construction activity. At the same time, demand increases sharply due to mass displacement, refugee flows, and migration towards safer regions, creating immediate pressure on available housing stock. This imbalance between limited supply and rapidly growing demand becomes the primary driver of price inflation in both rental and ownership markets. Beyond these direct effects, conflicts also trigger broader economic consequences that intensify housing inflation. Rising energy prices, shortages of raw materials, and labor displacement significantly increase construction costs, making new housing development slower and more expensive. If you liked this video and would like to see more like it, please give it the thumbs up, leave a comment, and click the button to subscribe.